China's strategic goal is to make sure that the U.S. has four enemies, and one of them must be a terrorist group.
We are giving up our life's blood so that the Chinese Communist Party can survive and thrive.
To date the writing, they estimate it was carved into the sandstone boulder between 1 and 250 AD. The stone features an unexpected mixture of thinly cut, shallow runes, rune-like characters, and other visual motifs. Some inscriptions are zigzag-shaped, while others form a grid pattern. The museum said interpreting the messages is a challenging task. That's because the way of writing inscriptions varied, and the language changed considerably over time. Antarctica's largest mountain, Mount Vinson, is over 16,000 feet tall, and an ultra runner just became the first person ever to reach the summit by running. Brazilian ultra runner Fernanda Maciel achieved this feat on Christmas Eve 2022. The 42-year-old completed a running ascent of Mount Vinson. All previous successful attempts to scale the Antarctic massif were achieved by mountaineers or ski mountaineers. Maciel's climb also set a new speed record of 9 hours and 41 minutes. She had to overcome temperatures of minus 31 degrees Fahrenheit, brutal winds, exposed mountain ridges, as well as altitude sickness, a broken crampon, and frozen goggles. That's all for today's program. We're really glad to have you with us. Please send us an email if you'd like to.
Aliens are black and brown people, the very ones that the left claims to care about, those living in the city with high school or less education. At some point, watch Biden offer a deal. I'll reimpose the Trump policies, he'll say. They gave us the most secure border perhaps ever in exchange for granting amnesty to millions of illegal aliens. Why? Votes, of course. Here's what a union leader of one of the largest unions said after the election of Barack Obama.
We, in the last election, had the largest turnout of Latino voters in our history. And everything tells us these voters fully intend to become engaged into the elections in the future. They have tasted what it is like to participate and win, and they are not going to go away because their involvement is basically because they feel that they are being taken advantage of, they are being singled out, and they are being scapegoated. Now, when they voted in November, they voted overwhelmingly for progressive candidates. Barack Obama got 2 out of every 3 voters that showed up. And so I think there's 2 things, very quickly, that matter for the progressive community. Number one, if we are to expect this electorate to win, the progressive community needs to solidly be on the side of immigrants. That will solidify and expand the progressive coalition for the future. And let me tell you, when you are in the middle of a fight for your life, you will remember who was there with you. And immigrants count on progressives to be able to do that. Number 2, we reformed the immigration laws. It puts 12 million people on the path to citizenship and eventually voters. Can you imagine if we have even the same ratio, 2 out of 3, if we have 80 million new voters that care about our issues and will be voting, we will create a governing coalition for the long term, not just for an election cycle.
I repeat, it's about votes. What's this? The great Aldersi has a page of conservatives and conservative content, and there's no reason to believe Google, YouTube, IG, Facebook were not and are still not doing the same thing. Look at this graph of the percentage of political contributions their employees gave to Democrats for the midterms. Look at that. Netflix, 99.6%. Twitter, 98.7%. Apple, 97.5%. Google, 96%. Facebook, 94.5%. Let's turn to academia. Liberal professors in the humanities substantially outnumber conservatives. According to the Harvard Crimson, liberal faculty at Harvard outnumber conservatives 82 to 1. Of the White House press corps, reporters who cover the White House, a report from the Federalist found that Democrats outnumber Republicans 12 to 1. In Hollywood, people in front of and behind the camera come out of the closet as a conservative at their peril. Even hard left-hating Hollywood lefty Alec Baldwin admitted it.
Artists, musicians, actors, and so forth who go into politics, the ones who identify as conservatives, who I think in LA they have like their own little club, you know what I mean? The people who are conservatives who feel that they are treated badly by Hollywood or they're treated unfairly by Hollywood. I hear that these conservatives say that there's a bias against them. And I think that's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. David Horowitz is the founder of the David Horowitz Freedom Center. He is a prolific author, including his excellent, I'd say, epic autobiography, Radical Son. His latest book is called Final Battle, The Next Election Could Be the Last. He joins us now. David, thank you very much for taking the time. David, the left is winning, aren't they?
I don't think so. I think this is a turning point. It's been happening for a while. Part of it is that Trump created the first mass conservative movement in our history. You couldn't find three conservatives marching on the Supreme Court, say, which nobody should do, without them looking at each other and saying, what are we, collectivists? But Trump has put together these gigantic crowds. And then there's this grassroots movement against parents who are objecting to the mutilation of their prepubescent kids in the name of gender fluidity, a preposterous concept in itself. So I think that the tide is turning. Also, the border, destruction of the border is not coming out quite the way the Democrats hoped. It's turning the Hispanic community off the Democratic Party. It's called The Law of Unintended Consequences. My book, which begins with Trump's loss, so to speak, in 2020 and carries through to January 6th affair, protest. It really, when you read the story, you see what these people are capable of. I never take my eye off that. Yes, they want votes, they want power, but what are they prepared to do for that? Well, Joe Biden illegally destroyed our immigration laws. The laws are still there, but he issued an executive order which is not only illegal but also unconstitutional, voiding them, nullifying them. Why do I say it's illegal and unconstitutional? Because Biden's the head of the executive branch. He has one source of authority and obligation, which is to enforce the law. If you want to change the immigration laws, you've got to go through Congress, the legislature that made them. But the Democrats, there was no protest among the Democrats. They're criminals. Their mentality is the same as criminals. Don't respect the law.
For reparations that a majority of blacks support.
It's racial extortion. A lot of the black community has had their heads turned by racists like Al Sharpton, who's a kingmaker now in the Democrat Party, right? And who created, in a way, MSNBC, a 24/7 racist channel. Right. Look, first of all, slavery is Africa's original sin, not America's. It existed for 1,000 years before a white person ever set foot there. As you point out, the American Revolution, its declaration that liberty is a God-given right of every child of God. It was a revolutionary statement which led, in a pretty short time, 20 years in the northern states, 76 in the southern. When Al Sharpton and his friends say there's 400 years of slavery in America, that's an out-and-out lie. There was never a successful black slavery road. The truth is, every black slave virtually white people didn't go and throw nets over them. They were sold at slave auctions. They were enslaved by black kings in Africa and sold at auction. So, the bottom line is that black Africa enslaved blacks and white America freed them at an incredible cost, 360,000 mainly white Union lives. Although I love the film Glory, which is about a black regiment. That's the truth.
Right.
This is just robbery, theft, and with a racist spin to it. It's corrupt people like Gavin Newsom that are pushing it. These Democrats, they're hypocrites, they're liars, and as I pointed out, they're all criminals supporting things like the destruction of our borders, which is a criminal act.
David, I want to end with this. Get your reaction to this. Again, I appreciate your optimism. I'm hoping that America is waking up. But let me just say this: the majority of Democrats still believe that Donald Trump said there were good Nazis and bad Nazis on both sides in Charlottesville. Even Jake Tapper of CNN said it wasn't true. And after Jake Tapper said it, David, Joe Biden goes on CNN and repeats it, and nobody says a word. They believe that Donald Trump said drink bleach to combat COVID. And they believe that Donald Trump mocked the disabled reporter when, in fact, he did not. In fact, in 2016, there was an NBC poll, David, that said the number one reason that likely voters did not like Donald Trump is because they believe he mocked a disabled reporter. Of course, he did no such thing. So those are three major lies the left still believes and still pushes about Donald Trump, which is why I have become a lot more pessimistic sometimes about America than I think you have.
Yeah, because when I came into the right 40 years ago, I looked around. The first thing I said is, where's the ground army? All my ex-comrades on the left, they have all these organizations that harass CEOs, harass congressmen, and get their way. And they converted, or helped to convert. You read the statistics of the tech industries. I mean, they've been indoctrinated in colleges to begin with. So now I see this tremendous movement among conservatives. A lot of what's happened to this country happened because conservatives sat on their hands. They have realized, it was Michael Kinsley who said, conservatives have realized and leftists live to bother other people. And that's been the case. They've done nothing. And even this leadership battle with Kevin McCarthy looks like it's turning people into much more aggressive fighters.
Well, David, I hope you're right. I interviewed Richard Veggery, one of the co-founders of National Review recently, and he told me in the last 20 years there have been 20,000 single-issue left-wing nonprofits versus between 1,000 and 2,000 right-wing single-issue nonprofits. And over that same period of time, the left-wing nonprofits have outraised the right-wing nonprofits 700%. And remember the $419.5 million that Zuckerberg spent to get out the Democrat vote during the 2020 election? Where were we? How could that happen right under our noses?
I wrote a book in 2015 called The New Leviathan, which published all the statistics that showed how the philanthropic world has been taken over by the left. And the taxpayers are forced to fund left-wing extremists. Every NGO on the border aiding in violating our immigration laws is a 501c3. And I actually wrote a pamphlet called the Internal Radical Service to highlight the Zuckerberg. When my book came out, it didn't receive one review from a conservative, not one. So things have... I mean, I see a progress just from my perspective. What can I say?
David Horowitz, Freedom Center. The book is called Final Battle. David, as always, thank you very much for coming on. My love to April.
Thank you, Larry.
The federal government hit that this morning. Now, the Treasury Department is set to begin taking what's called extraordinary measures to avoid a default and to ensure the federal government can continue financing its obligations for several more months. Congress now has the ability to raise the debt limit, and it has done that numerous times in the past. But it's something some Republicans have said they refuse to do this time without a negotiation first on cutting federal spending. Lawmakers have a few months to negotiate until the government defaults, something that really has never happened before. But if it does, it could hurt the national economy. Meanwhile, angry customers vented on social media yesterday about problems with their Bank of America and Zelle accounts. Some users said money vanished from their accounts. They also complained about a lack of information from either company about what went wrong. Zelle is a payment platform that millions of people use to send and receive money. The company says the problem is on Bank of America's side. Now, according to an NPR report, one user shared that Bank of America had magically disappeared a large Zelle transaction that they had used to pay bills. The user said their checking account was now in debt and they couldn't get a hold of anyone to help them, while another user said he was missing $1,300. He was told to call customer service, but said they weren't helping him. Bank of America said the problem, though, now has been resolved. And over in San Francisco, the homeless debate is back in the news. This comes after an art gallery owner was arrested yesterday for spraying a homeless woman with a hose last week. A video went viral, sparking outrage. It shows him telling her to move while she sits on the sidewalk near his gallery. The owner, Shannon Collier Gwynn, told the San Francisco Chronicle the woman was being belligerent just before he hosed her. She was turning over his trash cans and even spitting on him. He's now publicly apologized. He told CBS he feels awful about it because he's put a lot of effort into actually helping the woman, letting her sleep in his entryway and calling social services and police to try to get her help. Investigative journalist Michael Schellenberger actually wrote a very interesting book on homelessness in San Francisco. Now, he believes the problem comes down to progressive groups. He says that some would rather keep people on the street and defund shelters. On Twitter, he said the city previously required homeless people to come inside where it's safer. But then last month, a judge ordered the city to let people camp on the sidewalks again. Schellenberger says many of the homeless are mentally ill or addicted to drugs, and they're 3 times more likely to die outside. He says some solutions are to build enough shelters, enforce camping bans, and offer care for those who need it. If the gallery owner is convicted, he faces a $2,000 fine and up to 6 months in jail. And the entertainment industry as a whole is facing some earnings problems. Hollywood studios lost $500 billion in market value last year, and the head of the largest movie theater chain in the U.S. won't take a raise next year as a result. NTD's Sean Marshall has more.
Plain and simple, the entertainment industry is struggling. Hollywood and the world's largest media entertainment industry companies lost trillions of dollars in stock market value last year alone.
Stock prices of major media companies dropped at least 35% last year, some more than 60%. This isn't because they all turned into bad businesses overnight. Pandemic recovery is an obvious reason, as well as inflation and economic struggles causing cheaper entertainment decisions. What do people on the street think?
The first thing that should be improved is everyone thought if you unhook from your cable, you would be able to save money, but now there's 6 or 7 different services that you have to connect to. I don't care about that. I don't want to do that. I want to have 2. And then I could have like the Disney and then the whatever the other one would be, Netflix. Don't you think that seems to me like I don't want to have to pay more than I paid before.
One other factor may be a drop in Hollywood's share of the Chinese market. It fell from 45% a decade ago to just 8% so far this year. Increased competition from Chinese films
and political consequences for Biden. It is more than a little bit ironic that after Biden and his media allies spent the past 5 months castigating President Trump for having kept secret documents from his presidency, we now know that Biden did the exact same thing, only that Biden's case is much worse. Here's what happened. Earlier this week, the Department of Justice announced that lawyers for Biden had turned over a cache of 12 top-secret documents that were found at Biden's voluntarily had it not been for the issues that Trump is facing. That in itself underlines that these documents were most likely taken by Biden with very specific goals in mind. The location where these documents were found also throws up a number of very disturbing questions. The office where Biden kept the top secret materials belongs to the University of Pennsylvania. The university had set up the Penn Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement for Biden after his vice presidency. The center's offices were located at 101 Constitution Avenue in Washington, D.C. That's right next to the Capitol. It is not clear what the purpose of the center was, other than to provide Biden with a cushy gig and a nice office. The most recent update on the center's website is from April of last year. The one before that, which is the only entry for all of 2021, is from March of 2021. And the one before that is from a year earlier, April 2020. The most recent tweet from the center is from April of last year. You get the idea. There wasn't much activity, but there are many questions. The University of Pennsylvania is known for its deep ties to China and to the Chinese Communist Party. The university is particularly close to Shanghai Jiao Tong University, from which former Chinese leader Jiang Zemin graduated. The Shanghai Jiao Tong University is known to host Chinese Communist Party events, including the 11th Shanghai Jiao Tong Congress of the Communist Party, which was held in 2020, and a History of the Communist Party of China event last year. But it gets worse. The University of Pennsylvania not only has deep ties to China, it is also a recipient of huge amounts of shady donations from China. $54 million to be exact, most of which was given after the Biden Center was announced in February of 2017. In 2018, shortly after the center opened, there was a one-off, massive $14.5 million donation from an allegedly anonymous source in China. What's also notable is that Biden's Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, previously worked as the managing director of the center, which, as we have seen, does not seem to have much activity. So let's recap. We have a shady center set up as some form of landing pad for Biden and for his associates like Blinken that was paid for by a university with strong ties to China, which also happened to receive huge amounts of money from China. And that's where Joe Biden kept these secret documents, which he was not allowed to have once he left the vice presidency. And, mind you, unlike Trump, Biden as vice president had no authority to declassify anything, so that excuse won't work. So what were these documents about, and why did Biden hide them in his office at the University of Pennsylvania Center in Washington, D.C.? We have a number of clues. The secret documents are said to have been about Ukraine, Iran, and the United Kingdom, including documents from 2016, which was Biden's last year as vice president. Let's start with Ukraine. A little-known fact, which should really be receiving a lot more attention than it has, is that in his final days as vice president, Biden flew to Ukraine. It has never been fully understood what that trip was about. Normally, a presidential administration would not be conducting foreign affairs just days before a new administration arrives. Even Ukrainian officials and media were flabbergasted as to what Biden was there for. As recently released State Department emails show, the department too was wondering what was going on. The State Department cited a number of possible explanations that the Ukrainians themselves were putting forward. One Ukrainian commentator speculated that Mr. Vice President has a business interest here, and the former Vice President even more. Here in the shale gas Burisma company, his son had been working at a time. Perhaps the behind-the-scenes part of the visit can be attributed to the fact that the Ukrainian authorities guaranteed some business positions to the former vice president and his family. That was prescient because it just so happens that the criminal cases against Hunter's firm Burisma were dropped at the time of Biden's last-minute visit to Ukraine. Just as conspicuously, at around the same time, Burisma made a large donation to the far-left Atlantic Council, a Democrat Party favorite. So the Biden family's Burisma entanglements appear to have been one of the reasons for the last-minute visit, and it is possible that some of the documents which Biden secretly kept had something to do with that.